everyone. Just dropped my book. We are going to continue with our read aloud today. We're going to work on chapter 12, and you're going to actually tune into 13 after I read 12. But I do want to review quickly about what had happened in the previous chapter, chapter 11. And there was a funeral for the great aunt Bert, and the casket was closed. The soldiers were watching the house and questioned why these people were going in and out. And so they came in and they checked out what was going on. And at one point, one of the soldiers went to question why the casket was closed, because typically they were open for people to view during the funeral or during the viewing. And Mama went right over and she kind of explained to them that the reason why this wasn't open is because the disease that Aunt Bert had, which scared the soldier and said, okay, forget it. We're not opening that. I don't want to get whatever she had. So kind of scared them off, and they ended up leaving. After they left, after the appropriate amount of time that they were gone, it started to be revealed why the people were all gathered there. And it was like a safe place for them to gather before being smuggled over from Denmark over to Sweden. And so Peter was in charge of trying to get that to happen. And so as we continue, we're going to see what happens in chapter 12. Where was Mama? Mr. Rosen tripped on the loose step outside the kitchen door. His wife grasped his arm, and he regained his balance. It's very dark, Mama whispered, as they stood in the yard with their blankets and bundles of food gathered in their arms. And we can't use any kind of light. I'll go first. I know the way very well, and you'll follow me. Try not to stumble over the tree roots in the path. Feel carefully with your feet. The path is uneven. And be very, very quiet, she added, unnecessarily. The night was quiet, too. A slight breeze moved in the tops of the trees, and from across the meadow came the sound of the sea's movement, which was a constant sound here and had always been. But no birds called or cried here now, in the night. The cow slept silently in the barn, the kitten upstairs in Kirsty's arms. There were stars here and there, dotting the sky, among the clouds, but no moon. Anne-Marie shivered, standing on the foot of the steps. Come, said Mama, as she murmured. She moved away from the house. One by one, the Rosens turned and hugged Anne-Marie silently. Ellen came to her last. The two girls held each other. I'll come back someday, Ellen whispered fiercely. I promise. I know you will, Anne-Marie whispered back, holding her friend tightly. And then they were gone, Mama and the Rosens. Anne-Marie was alone. She went into the house, crying suddenly, and closed the door against the night. The lid of the casket was closed again, and now the room was empty. There was no sign of people who had sat there for hours before. Anne-Marie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She opened the dark curtains in the windows, and she curled once more in the rocker, trying to relax. She traced their route in her mind. She knew the old path, too, not as well as her mother, but who had followed it almost every day of her childhood with her dog scampering behind. But Anne-Marie had often walked to town back that way, and remembered the turns, the twisted trees, whose gnarled roots pushed the earth now and then into the knotted clumps, and the thick bushes that often flowered in the early summer. She walked with them in her mind, feeling the way through the darkness. It would take them, she thought, a half an hour to reach the place where Uncle Henrik was waiting with their boat. Mama would leave them there, pausing a minute, no more, for a final hug, and then she would turn and come home. It would be faster for Mama alone, with no need to wait as the Rosens, unfamiliar with the path, slowly felt their way along. Mama would hurry, sure-footed now, back to her children. The clock in the hall struck once. It was 2:30 in the morning. Her mother would be home in an hour. Anne-Marie decided. She rocked gently back and forth in the old chair. Mama would be home by 3:30. She thought of her papa back in Copenhagen alone. He would be awake too. He would be wishing that he could have come, but knowing too that he must come and go, as always, to the corner store for the newspaper, to his office when the morning came. And now he would be afraid of them, and watching the clock, waiting for word that the Rosens were safe, that Mama and the girls were here at the farm, starting a new day with the sun shining through the kitchen window and the cream on their oatmeal. It was harder for the ones who were waiting, Anne-Marie knew. Less danger, perhaps, but more fear. She yawned and her head nodded. She fell asleep, and it was a sleep as thin as the night clouds, dotted with dreams that came and went like the stars. Light woke her, but it was not really morning, not yet. It was only the first hint of slightly lightening sky, a pale gleam at the edge of the meadow, a sign that far away somewhere to the east where Sweden still slept, morning would be coming soon. Dawn would creep across the Swedish farmland and coast, and then it would wash little Denmark with light and move across to the North Sea to wake Norway. Anne-Marie blinked in confusion, sitting up and remembering after a moment where she was and why. But it was not right. The pale light at the horizon, it should still be dark. It should still be night. She stood stiffly, stretching her legs. It was past 4 o'clock. Where was Mama? Perhaps she had come home and not wanted to wake Anne-Marie and had gone to bed herself. Surely that was it. Mama must have been exhausted. She had been up all night and had made the dangerous journey to the boat, and returned through the dark woods, wanting only to sleep. Quickly, Anne-Marie went up the narrow staircase. The door to the bedroom where she had slept with Ellen was open. The 2 small beds were neatly made, covered with old quilts and empty. Beside it, Uncle Henrik's door was open too, and his bed too was unused and emptied. Despite her worry, Anne-Marie smiled slightly when she saw some of Henrik's clothes crumpled in a chair and a pair of shoes caked with barnyard dirt lying on the floor. He needs a wife, she said to herself, imitating Mama. The door to the other bedroom, the one Kirsty and Mama were sharing, was closed. Quietly, not wanting to wake them, Anne-Marie pushed it open. The kitten's ears moved, standing up straight, its eyes open wide, and it raised its head and yawned. It prided itself out of Kirsty's arms, stretched, and then jumped lightly to the floor and came to Anne-Marie. It rubbed itself against her leg and purred. Kirsty sighed and turned in her sleep. One arm, free now of the kitten's warmth and comfort, flung itself across the pillow. There was no one else in the wide bed. Anne-Marie moved quickly to the window which overlooked the clearing that led to the path's entrance. The light outside was still very dim, and she peered through the dimness, trying to see, looking for the opening in the trees where the path began, looking for Mama hurrying home. After a second, she saw a shape there, something unfamiliar, something that had not been there the day before. A dark shape, no more than a blurred heap at the beginning of the path. Anne-Marie squinted, forcing her eyes to understand, needing to understand, not wanting to understand. The shape moved, and she knew it was her mother laying on the earth. All right, please stay tuned or tune into the next chapter, chapter 13, and see what happens to Mama.